1. I am from Portugal, which is a small country where everyone is rather nice and welcoming. There aren't many cases of violence as well. We are peaceful people. I live in the outskirts of the capital in a quite small village where everyone knows each other, and rarely anything ever happens. 2 years ago, my mom was chatting with my neighbor who owns a coffee shop right under my building, and she informed her that the old lady had been robbed in her house, the building across from ours. Apparently she lived alone, and a woman who appeared to be about 30 years old knocked on her door asking her to sign some kind of form for a charity organization. But she didn't have a pen. Major red flag. The old lady said she would grab one inside, and as she turned around into her living room, the woman grabbed her and 2 other women entered the lady's house and started stealing everything they could. My mom was shocked and told us this story the minute she got home, whilst warning us that we should never open our door to strangers. She even called my grandma, who lives alone, to warn her as well. For a few weeks I was exceptionally careful, but ended up forgetting about it. 1 year later I was home alone as it was summer and school was out. It was 1 in the afternoon and I was having lunch while watching TV. The front door is visible from the living room sofa where I was sitting. My doorbell rang out of the blue, as did my neighbor's to open the door downstairs. I never open this door, unless there are 2 rings to my house or I'm expecting someone, as it is usually the mailman or some cable TV company. Therefore, I didn't even bother to get up and just forgot all about it. An hour later, about 2 p.m., I had finished eating but was still sitting on my sofa watching a movie when my doorbell rang again. This time for me to open the door that separates the hallway from my home. I got up quietly, and walking up to the door I could see light through the peephole. There's an automatic light in my hallway that is activated by movement, but there is a switch underneath it that allows you to turn the light off. Through the peephole I saw a woman and thought, she could be one of my neighbors, except she was dressed in some kind of uniform. I asked, "Who is it?" Keeping my door closed but looking at her through the round hole in the door, she hesitated and answered, "It's me." I wasn't expecting anyone and I couldn't recognize her face, so I asked, "Okay, but who is me?" Again she hesitated and giggled, answering with, "Flavia." That's when I noticed that she wasn't alone. There was another woman standing at her right side, hiding so that I wouldn't see her. But she must have forgotten that she was meant to do that, as I could clearly see her whole arm. To be honest, I thought it was strange but not really concerning, so I just told her, "I don't know anyone by that name. What do you want?" She answered a few moments later, "I'm collecting money for UNICEF." I wasn't going to open my door and compromise my safety, so I told her, "I'm sorry, but I don't have any money in the house." All of a sudden, the lights turned off in the hallway, and I could only hear giggles and more than one person running down the stairs. All the while she had been there, I had been watching her through the peephole. Till the end of our conversation, I could clearly see her and her friend just standing there. Also, there's no way the light would have turned off without someone switching the light off manually, which leads me to believe that there was a 3rd woman. I was left standing there perplexed, shaking because I was scared, and I was only a 15-year-old girl. I called my mom and texted my friends telling them what had happened, and that's when I remembered the story I mentioned above. Those bitches probably wanted to mug me and do God knows what. My mom was coming home to pick me up because I had a doctor's appointment, and when she got there I remember picking up a big knife and putting it in my bag just in case they were still out of my door waiting for me. Sometime later, around 8 p.m., I was having dinner with my family when the doorbell rang. I had told my parents what had happened, so they were extra careful. My dad went to the door and saw 2 women. He asked who it was and they replied with, "Good afternoon, we are from UNICEF and we are collecting money and raising awareness." I heard that, and was immediately terrified. I thought they had come back to kill me or something. My dad opened the door and asked them if they had been to our house before. They were surprised and said they hadn't, and questioned us if something had happened. The women were dressed in casual clothing and not the uniform I had previously seen, so I told my dad that. Again, they asked us if everything was okay. My dad summed up what had happened to me, and they replied with, "I'm sorry, but there was no way they were from UNICEF." My dad wished them good night after contributing with some money to help the organization, and closed the door. I never saw those women again, and never heard of any stories similar to mine ever since. So, bitches who tried to rob me, let's not meet again. 2. This happened in May 2007, and for reference, I'm female, was 20 at the time, and weighed about 115 pounds, so overpowering me would have been extremely easy. I live in a city in Northern Ireland, and at the time, I was best friends with my ex-boyfriend. My ex-boyfriend's cousin's band decided to play a small gig way out in the countryside, so we had to drive for about an hour or more to get to the location. We arrived, and it was literally a field amongst fields, smack back in the back arse of nowhere. Apparently one of the members of the band knew the owner of this field, and apparently we had permission to be there. I never checked, so I don't know, but whatever. There were several cars already there when we arrived. Me, my ex, his sister, and 2 friends traveled together. We had packed the car full of tents, sleeping bags, and a ton of alcohol. The plan was to watch the band, then blast some tunes, have a bit of a party, and spend the night in the field in our tents. The field was laid out with this kind of an L shape. All the tents were set up around the corner, and the band had set up a generator across the field on the other side. Then, beside where the tents were, there was a hole in a bush to the other field. We went through here to go to the toilet, so we had some privacy from everyone. There was roughly 30 to 40 people in the field, and the band started playing. We started drinking and generally having a great time. Anytime I needed to pee, I went with my ex's sister or a friend, as it was a good few minutes' walk to the next field, and none of us wanted to go alone, even though we were in the middle of nowhere. I was sharing a tent with my ex for the night, and at about 3 a.m., I decided I'd had enough and wanted to go back to the tent to sleep. I told him I was going, and made my journey across the field to the tents. As I got into the tent and pulled the zipper down, I felt someone tugging at it, and assumed it was my ex, until I heard an unfamiliar voice say, "Let me in." Quite aggressively. I called out, "Who are you?" And he said, "I know you're alone in there. You can't hold the zipper down forever. Let me in." Over the next minute or so, I was gripping onto the zipper of the tent and holding both sides of the fabric together to prevent this guy from getting into my tent. A couple of times he managed to get the zipper up a bit, but I always managed to get it back down. For the life of me, I have no idea how I managed to do this. The whole time we were struggling against each other over the zipper, he kept saying things like, "I'm going to get in eventually, bitch. It's going to be worse if you don't fucking let me in." I was absolutely petrified. Then I heard my ex-boyfriend's booming voice shout, "What the fuck are you doing at that tent?" Then I heard a smack and a thud, and my ex called to me to ask if I was okay. My ex had saw what was happening, punched the guy, and he fell. He had watched me walk to the tents and watched this dude follow behind, assuming he was going to the loo. But he kept watching him to make sure. When he saw him turn towards the tents, he came over to make sure I was okay. Thank God he did. Anyway, a huge fight broke out, and then one of the creepy guy's friends ended up hitting him too. Turns out he was known for this kind of creepy behavior, and had been in trouble with the law for sexually harassing women in the past. And my ex's cousin had said that he was staying over at her house with her brother one night, and she woke up to find him standing in her room watching her sleep. I really don't know what his intentions were, had he managed to fight his way into the tent that night. No one would have heard anything as the music was so loud. But thank goodness my ex still cared enough about me to keep an eye on me as I made my way back to the tent that night. My ex actually bumped into the guy a few weeks later and told me that his lip was still pretty busted up and looked like he was going to have a permanent scar from the 2 punches. 3. This is a long read. It covers the span of a year or so in my life, so bear with me. This story has so much going on that the Cliff Notes would need Cliff Notes. The most concise summary is in the title already. I am an uninteresting man in my late 20s, with a stable job and a happy family. Being so, I had never even entertained the thought that I might, one day, be the target of a stalker. So here's my story as a warning to everyone. You don't have to be a typical pretty young lady to catch the eye of a stalker. I don't know if this makes sense, but I am a habitual, yet very casual, Facebook user. I don't post a lot, but I do check my newsfeed often. One Saturday night, I was doing a quick round on Facebook before I went to bed, when I received a friend request. I accepted it without hesitation. Just about every friend request I receive gets accepted because I don't ever post anything very personal. As I said, I have a very casual approach to social networking. I do a quick glance on the profile that had friended me, and saw that it was an obviously fake account. Not thinking much about it, I put my computer away and fell asleep. The next day I was having lunch at a friend's house, having completely forgotten about the request from the night before. My phone buzzed, and I saw that I had gotten a message from a coworker of mine, Maya. Although Maya and I worked together, and had a few mutual friends outside of work, we didn't communicate much other than when it was about work. I checked it, assuming it was work-related. I guess, looking back, you can say it was. To get the gist of it, the Facebook account that friended me also friended Maya, and had bombarded her with insults and accusations of being a whore, slut, and every name in the book. The person took it a step further by messaging Maya's husband, saying that she was cheating on him with a coworker. Maya wanted to know if I knew who the person was, because I was the only other person that accepted the friend request. I explained to her how I accept every request, and had no idea who it was. I then proceeded to unfriend the profile in question. Maya explained to me that she already had suspicions on who it was, but just wanted to see if I could confirm it. She believed it was Carrie. Let's rewind a few weeks earlier. I had received a friend request from Carrie. It struck me as odd because although we worked at the same place, we had never met, never spoken, nor had we ever made eye contact or been within 20 feet of each other. We worked in different departments, but I walked past her every day because I had to walk through her department to get to our lounge. That was the furthest extent of our interactions. I only learned her name from when she friended me on Facebook, and I recognized her picture. I'm not sure how she found my name. Carrie also friended my wife's profile, and subsequently began to shift through hundreds and years of my wife's posts and pictures, liking and commenting on several of them. She began interacting with my posts too, as though she knew us as well. At work, though, I walked by like usual and still no interaction. I found it odd, but didn't look too far into it. So back to the present. The mysterious Facebook account continued to harass Maya, until she told her that she knew it was Carrie, and was going to call the police. I thought that was the end of it, but boy, was I wrong. Over several weeks I began getting more friend requests from girls looking to hook up with me. Obviously, I knew they were all fake, and for the most part I ignored them. I also began getting notifications from my Google and Facebook accounts about suspicious activity on my profile. Most of the time it warned me of failed login attempts. One I specifically remember said my Facebook account was actually logged in from somewhere unusual, and asked me whether it was me. It wasn't me, and I should have been more concerned, but for some reason I didn't care. I was stupid, and even after that I didn't bother to change my password. At the time, I viewed all of these happenings as random, isolated incidents. I had no valuable stuff in my account and didn't have any private, secretive messages. What harm could they do, right? Right? A few months pass when one day my wife gets a message from Carrie stating that she had bought a high-end film camera and was looking to start some amateur filming. She wanted to know if she would help her by letting her film our family for a day. Remembering what Maya had said months ago, I was reluctant, but wanted to give Carrie the benefit of the doubt. So we agreed to tell her that we'd schedule a time for her whenever we weren't busy, and left it at that. Once again, I have yet to actually meet Carrie. More weeks pass by and we completely forget about scheduling the film shoot, when Carrie messages me about it. I turn her down. Then things got weird. She sent several GIFs of stick figures doing sexually suggestive motions and gyrations. I didn't respond, so she asked, "Funny, isn't it?" I immediately texted my wife to log into my Facebook profile to observe the messages. Not wanting to be rude, I agreed with Carrie as of the humor in the GIFs she sent, and carried on the conversation. She proceeded to send me old photos from my abandoned MySpace account that I had completely forgotten about. This was around the time when MySpace had been revamped, and a lot of people lost a lot of cherished memories. Somehow she dug mine up and decided to share them with me. It was creepy to me. Things escalated quickly from there. She began talking about her body and how she wasn't attractive, trying to bait me into complimenting her looks. She was not beautiful, but she was an attractive person. I didn't bite though. Then she hit me with something out of the blue. She asked about my penis, calling it my cock and suggesting that it was probably really big. I decided that was enough and stopped responding. Of course, my wife was reading the whole time and we were texting back and forth about how funny and weird this all was. I continued to go to work and still awkwardly never actually met her. I especially didn't want to strike up any conversations after that. Carrie messaged me one final time asking for a favor. Maya had blocked her profile, and Carrie suspected that Maya was saying bad stuff about her, so she wanted to check her profile to confirm. I told her that I wasn't going to stalk Maya for her, and that was that. Just between us, though, I did check, and no. Maya couldn't care less to waste her time talking about Carrie. Around this time, my wife got a text from an unknown number. The person knew her name but was trying to remain anonymous and was trying to flirt with her. We were with a bunch of friends at the time and we all thought it'd be funny if we all text flirted with this person at the same time to annoy them. Once again, I never thought to connect any of the incidents. Carrie eventually quit work, and I never saw her again, but I continued to get suspicious activity and friend requests that I, stupidly, continued to write off. I had all but forgotten about Carrie. Then I'd say over a year later, I get a bomb from my wife. A good friend of ours texted her saying that I was sending her very inappropriate messages on Facebook. I had been busy running errands all day, and hadn't really checked my Facebook at the time. I found that my password had been changed, and when I finally logged back on, all of my messages had been cleared. I had no idea the extent of what happened, until I started hearing from more people that I was being very suggestive and nasty to them. The thing was, these weren't random women on my friends list that were targeted. These were women that were close to me, good friends, my wife's sisters, my friends' wives. These messages weren't holding back either. They went all out in graphic detail about what I wanted to do to them. I felt completely violated and humiliated. I couldn't imagine how the women felt. My wife and I were really close to our families and friends, and every other week or so, all our friends would get together and drink, barbecue, watch movies or sports, and hang out. We'd have several families over and never had a problem. All of them said they understood what happened, and they know it wasn't me. Deep inside, though, I could see that they felt it possibly, potentially, probably was me. Over time, more and more of them stopped coming over to the point where my home started to feel empty. I confided in my wife of how I felt, that they think it was me, and she rebutted that I was just being paranoid. She argued that our friends were just busy with their lives, that they'd eventually come over when they were free again. I then learned that someone had created a Facebook account using my name and picture, and had continued harassing the same women. One of them posted a picture of the conversations with me on Facebook. She commented that it really could be me because that mystery person had used some words that I typically would. She also stated that the person knew my friends and family extensively. My heart instantly shattered reading that. I quit checking my Facebook for the longest time, and I guess I fell into a mild depression. I felt miserable. I told my wife that I wanted to disappear and strongly considered quitting my job of 7 years and moving away to start anew. I know now that I was being quite irrational, and thankfully my wife stayed strong for me through it all. I felt like I needed to defend my honor and start gathering alibis of times, people, and places I was around during the time of many of those messages. My wife brutally told me that she couldn't believe I was weak enough to let a no-life dumbass on Facebook put me down and make me feel that way. Which is true. I am, and always have been, a very mentally strong person. I always looked for the best in a bad situation, but for some reason this affected me differently. I can't explain why, but I felt extreme shame and guilt for something I didn't even do. Without my wife's support, knocking me back to reality, I don't know what would have happened. We advised our friends to just ignore the person, and eventually everything stopped. From time to time I still get a random friend request, but I don't accept them anymore. I don't have any proof that this was all the work of Carrie. It just all happened during a time when she injected herself into my life, and eventually stopped after she left it. My friends started coming over again, but it hasn't felt the same ever since then. I don't know if it's them or if it's just in my head. My wife and I came to the conclusion that Carrie reveled in the misery of others. After tormenting Maya, she moved on and targeted me, trying to ruin my marriage and distance me from my friends for no other reason than the fact that she enjoyed doing so. I'm sure she hasn't stopped, and left me alone only because she found a new victim to harass. Carrie, I never met you. Let's not meet. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 171. Thank you very much to everyone who allowed me to use their story in this video. You know, I really like the name Carrie. Too bad that one was such a psycho butthead, but I do quite like the name. I've actually been spending part of this night looking into emails and copyright. You may have heard me mention a couple of months back, maybe about 2 months now, that I'd gotten permission to use the story, the big chunk of which was a reprint of an email. And I have permission from the recipient of that email, it was unsolicited, to do a reading of the story, and I've done a reading of it, but I've still tried to find if I can legally do it. And the thing is, if you look at the advice 10 lawyers have given for similar situations, you get 10 different answers. So I think for now I'm just going to have to abandon that story. I'll keep it on my hard drive there, but for the moment I'm not going to be able to use it, which is a little disappointing because I was quite pleased with how it turned out. Ah well. And with that, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.